the overseers of La Mancha Land are no more. However, there is still one last thing that Dante's 11 need to consider. Sancho was quiet after Dante's 11 killed the overseers of the Mancha Land, those families supposedly closest to her, although she barely interacted with them, even before it fell apart. Don Quixote was hit by the fact that Nicolina, Coriambro and Dulcinea were no longer with him. He then sent Sancho to gallop on to strike at their foes, like when they vanquished the giants or overgorged bloodfiends during the Bloodfiend War, to strike at them with a heart that knows no fear. Sancho understood that she thought that she was galloping onward towards something, but she was going in circles. She saw herself as a hollow shell, a mere vestige, trapped on a carousel to nowhere. A madwoman slumbering in a sweet dream of galloping astride a steed on a vast field, feeling the cool breeze against her face. Dante referred to her as Don Quixote, asking if she can still hear them, urging her not to listen to him. Sancho considered the one he called Don Quixote as dead, and Dante didn't have a response to that. Sancho wished that Don Quixote forgot that she ever existed, yet she returned there, so that she never forgot what she was again, so that she may pronounce the dream ended. Dante's 11 then had to fight Sancho, who was Don Quixote's last line of defense. She was weak to piercing, wrath, lust and gluttony, but strong against sloth and gloom. She's a typical blood fiend that bleeds the enemy, which can also increase damage dealt if there's enough of it. She can also consume the Armadura de Sangre, or blood armor status, to heal SP, along with Blood Feast. In the first phase of the battle, at the start, she'll have severe weakening of damage dealing and defense, but this will pass next turn, and her Blood Feast will be at 400. She also grows more damaging with each 10% of her maximum HP she's missing, and is faster with each 300 Blood Feast she has. Once she's at 80% HP, Sanson then asked what happened to them, showing how that tale played out. Ishmael could see that Sancho was really strong. Ortiz understood that the Bloodfiends of La Mancha Land were significantly weakened due to their imprisonment and lack of blood for 200 years, but she, a second kindred, wasn't a foe that they could reasonably contend with. Heathcliff basically asked, "What else is new? They'll die, revive, try again, and eventually wear her down." Ryushi saw DR strategy, or die, revive, against her as meaningless. Ortiz saw that her regenerative ability is incomparably faster than Cassetti on the warp train. Attrition won't work on her. Dante asked if she was going to keep standing in the way. She was. Sinclair asked what she was going to do, taking a step towards Sancho. What does she want to do to La Mancha Land? She made it clear that she'll do Don Quixote's bidding and transform it into an image of his own design. She'll kill them and then find more humans to kill, feed their blood to Don Quixote, like the good blood fiend she is. So at best, going back to the blood fiend fold, and at worst, drawing more attention to themselves than they'd like. She'll then use the ecstasy... She'll use the ecstasy of blood skill, which can't be broken, which is quite damaging and will inflict much bleed, She'll then be capable of generating a shield based on her blood armor with some attacks. Once she's at 60%, Dante saw that the door was shut. Something had occurred to them. That adamantine door that stood between them was tightly shut, the chain securely fastened. Whatever they said wouldn't reach her, and she had no wish to open that door. A stalemate. The others so far concealed their troubles, tried to avoid others understanding them, but in the end, they all wanted something. A faith that Dante would be able to do something for them, or at least they'd find their wishes at the end. They all had dreams. Gregor wanted to no longer be an outcast. Radia wanted to be special. Sinclair wanted to confront his past. Yisang wanted to change. Ishmael wanted to sail forward unanchored. Heathcliff wanted to mend two hearts broken apart. Every time they reached out, they cried out each of their dreams to them, and somehow they managed to pull them away from the edge that led to their own abyss. But to Don Quixote, or Sancho, as she was now, the dream ended. Dante had nothing to give her, nothing to offer her. Dante's role stopped at breaking through each of their barriers to retrieve their lost dreams, getting their past, or rather getting them past the doors to their hearts that remained open, no matter how narrow the gaps were. But they've not even been given anything new to dream about. Dante still called her Don Quixote. She told him again, that's not who she was. She considered that fool that used to twinkle her eyes at them, shoving some ridiculous idea of a dream before them as dead. Dante then asked herself if her dream had ended, along with Don Quixote. The one that Sancho was guarding, has his dream ended as well? Then Sinclair asked what if the dream still continued. This surprised Dante. Sancho saw her dream as ripened until rot set in. Then it fell to the ground and burst, seeing it as a decaying broken carcass. Dante could see Sancho's lifeless gaze, seeing nothing but futility that extended beyond the horizon. The look of a straw nihilist. Sinclair redirected her gaze towards himself, arguing that the Manchalan manifests to devour humans, but it eventually disappears again. Even as he lay there, his body torn apart by thousands of stakes, he's been trying, perhaps even he. Sancho patiently waited for him to continue. Sinclair then told her that what he thought they must do, they have to go back to the birthplace of that dream. Dante noticed something. The tightly shut door suddenly shook. In front of it stood Sinclair, and a familiar red sign, although incomplete, briefly flickered on his forehead, and a blinding white light surrounded him. Sinclair was... Then Dante realized that it was the night of the white moon that was the start of it. Sancho then remembered Bari, as did Don Quixote. It was a while since he spoke of her. Then we see a vision of the past. He noticed that a human was at his mansion. A blood fiend apologized to him. They should never let her through. Rather, never have let her through. She wielded all kinds of fantastical weapons. She demanded to be granted an audience with him. Seeing her as a blood fiend hunter that had managed to break through his children's vigilance, he commended her for this, as it wasn't easy. He then asked what this audience was for, to be obliterated without a trace or to join his family. Barley said neither. She's there to challenge him to a duel. He made it clear that unlike other blood fiends, he doesn't kill humans for sport, but he won't let her or any human walk into her own doom to leave without consequences. Barley asked if he knew that humans and blood fiends were at war out there. He saw this as just a pit fight, between bloodfiends that have no control over their bloodthirst and humans that derive pleasure from their hatred towards them. He cared not about that. Yes, clearly staying neutral in a conflict at that point. Barry asked why he refused to take a side. A family of his might would mean a decisive end of the war, for whichever side he chose. Don Quixote already told her, asking if her fleeting human life required a simpler explanation. He refused to bring himself down to the level of those that dirtied their clothes in a pit fight. Barley understood this. Either she hadn't found the river of, immortality that Jar Citrun was looking for centuries from that point yet, or she had, and Don Quixote can't sense that. She was there to do one of two things. 1, convince him, or 2, slay him, if she can't. Because he's more dangerous than both sides when he's sat there doing nothing, as if he was waiting for both sides to destroy themselves and he can come out on top against a stronger, but still weakened opponent, demanding that he duel her. She won't get another chance like that again. Or rather, give one. Because she knows exactly what he seeks. Don Quixote didn't have that knowledge. And this caught his attention. A human who doesn't know him and has only just met him claims to know that. Barry knows the bloodfiends. They live longer than humans, but are cursed to greater miseries with every second of that life. Basically, the only thing that they have left to conquer that matters is boredom. Don Quixote didn't want to stain the newly clean carpets with lowly human blood, telling her to leave and his children outside the mansion would deal with her. Barry made it clear that if he uses children to kill her, she'll never learn the source of his suffering. He'll remain unchanged, stagnant, steeped in his misery, until the memory of that moment will one day return to him in regret. Or rather, as regret. Sancho offered to quietly take care of Barry telling him to grab his weapon, answer this duel, and she promised him upon her honor as a fixer that she'll grant him what he truly seeks. Clearly fixers weren't always driven primarily by greed as they are now. There was a time when that aspect wasn't as strong. She can give him... Don Quixote didn't think that any human or bloodfiend was capable of matching his strength. She saw this as being the honor of being the first human to do so. This was intriguing to Don Quixote. Sancho was silent. The duel continued for 3 days. Neither won. Sancho offered that they take a brief respite, as it's been 3 days. Don Quixote was surprised by this. Sancho was certain of this, as there had been 3 sunrises and sunsets. Don Quixote complained that no victor had been decided. Barry failed to see that as her problem, although she agreed that they needed rest to recover and duel again at a later date. This was surprising. She'd stopped the battle before it ended, allowing her enemy to rest, and even promised to return at a later date. Who decided that those odd rules would become laws? Barry told them, she told him fixers did. It's the law of fixers. Sancho told them that he allowed Barley to leave, not letting the others attack her. Sancho questioned the wisdom of his decision to let Barley leave. She instantly warned him that she'd return. Don Quixote said that it was their law, A few days later, he told Sancho to tell her that he's indisposed that day and had no time to spare. Sancho told him to go tell her himself. She was growing tired of this. Don Quixote asked what joy she had from this. The least she could have done is arrive at their gates with hands full of refreshments. Sancho asked. How should she know? She was only certain that Barry would continue to pester them until the gates were opened. Don Quixote asked why he ever agreed to something so vexatious. Sancho believed that it was about time they put an end to this. She finds no joy in telling him this, but it doesn't befit his reputation to be locked in a duel with a mere human for this long. It's causing the others to question him. Don Quixote told her that she'd understand the pain of dealing with children when she has kindreds of her own. She refused to do that, and has said this a number of times. Don Quixote saw this as harsh. He intended to put an end to this that day. Something that he's been planning to do for a while. Sancho asked if he required her assistance. She'd be enough to tip the scales in his favour. He didn't want that, as the duel must be fair and just. Sancho asked if it was not what he said before, something about the laws of fixers. She asked what fixers are. Don Quixote didn't know. Sancho saw that absurd duel continuing with no end in sight. She was measuring time like some kind of referee. She told them that it was time. Barry saw that as close. She thought that there would be a victor in this duel. Don Quixote wanted to ask her something. Barry let him, and he asked, what is a fixer? What about them makes her so pertinacious and stubborn? She mentioned the laws of them on the first bout, asking if the honour of fixers was so significant that she'd bet her life on it. She's willing to tell him, if he wants her to. They both lowered their weapons, and another few days later, Sancho noted that he's looking forward to her arrival now. He's waiting for her. He saw it as Barry's fault that she cut herself off, just as the stories was right at the climax. Then he saw Barry was there, and he told Sancho to let her in. She had nothing to say about this, and then she asked what happened to the fool whose rope snapped at the exact moment. Don Quixote wanted to know what happened to the siblings first. Barney answered both. The fool who hung onto the rotten strand of rope fell, and the siblings lived. This was exciting to Don Quixote. The suspense was moistening his hands. He then asked Sancho, when did she saddle up so close to their conversation? Several days later, Don Quixote asked Barry if she recalled the place that she told him upon their last meeting. This amusement park. She did. She wants her to speak of it again. Sancho complained that this was the 7th time. Don Quixote could find no mention of them in any books of heroic tales, asking Barney to describe the sight. She told them that children enter there, holding tightly onto their parents' hands. He asked about their expressions. Barney described them as radiant with the happiest, brightest smiles in the world, wearing pretty headbands or elaborate masks, playing catchy, exciting music all the year round, which people dance to. The guests can do what they want, depending on what they can afford, of course. Sancho failed to see the point of it. Don Quixote wanted to know more about the rides. Barry described a carousel, where visitors each ride upon a steed that goes in circles. Sancho saw this as devoid of meaning. Then Barley she described, or at least mentioned, the observation wheel. From there, they can view the sights from a higher elevation, and this impressed Don Quixote. They made a giant, thousands of humans tall, and can also enter its body. Seeing this as a splendid method of overcoming their fears, and Sancho saw this as a misunderstanding of what it is, Don Quixote had an idea most ingenious, and Sancho told Barry that this is where she stops listening to him. And Barry asked, should she stop listening to him? Don Quixote was seeing them as becoming alike in the worst possible ways. He wished to build one himself, where humans and bloodfiends can coexist. He shall call it La Mancha Land. Step by step, 1, 2, 3, she found herself engrossed in her tales. It's how this dream became hers. But it wasn't long before it was broken and cast aside. Like Don Quixote, Yi-Sang saw that there exists an understanding beyond sight. Why doesn't La Mancha Land not remain there? It vanishes within hours of appearing. It can only be Don Quixote's lingering desire to protect the humans. Sancho didn't answer that. She told them that Don Quixote gave Rocinante to her so that she can go on adventures on her own. But her tales weren't even real. They were all fake. Once she drank from the river of oblivion, once she imprisoned herself in that cell that she made, she spent every day there as a shut-in, immersed in the books of fixers, tainting her story with vicious lies. Was that not what they always said to her? That it was about time, that she woke up from her delusions? Now that she was to come back to her senses, she would use the Don Quixote hard-blood art to Armadura de Sangra on them, which will result in bleed being inflicted while taking damage and a shield of 500 HP gained after consuming 200 Blood Feast. Regardless of the result, damage will be dealt, but Sancho will receive Fragile and will weaken her own attacks by 50%. Once she was at 40%, she asked, why do they persist? They told her many times to come to her senses. Why this hypocrisy? Why continue this senseless fight? Telling them to wake up. She is not the person she once knew. Or rather, they once knew. Dante felt as if their clock hands had grown rusted. They couldn't speak. They couldn't say anything. What should they do? They follow her there to continue her dream, but they don't have anything to offer her. No dreams of their own. No memories of their own. Nothing to share with her. Thankfully, his 11 had what they lacked. And Heathcliff thought that she was a right troublemaker. But she liked her idea of justice, honour, and loyalty. After all that grandstanding, she's going to leave them without, giving them that glum, sour-faced look? Does she think that they'll quietly sit down and accept that? Sancho wanted to know what nonsense they were. Then Yi-Sang didn't want to leave behind a dearest fellow of his again. Rodia thought that it'd be depressing in the bus without Chiquita. They all said that they thought of her, even knowing what she was. Sinclair asked if she didn't have any more tales of adventures to share with them, encouraging her to tell them, as they've had so many cut short during their bus rides. No trace of fear was in their voices, then were reminded of the thrill of her peddling on the emergency power supply for their propulsion of the Great Lake. to get Mephistopheles moving to escape a wave of deadly hentai. Yes, this one. Then we're at Gregor's Fathoms when Herman's hands were crushing the G-Corp soldiers, saying that there's no cause for hesitation, a true hero doesn't succumb to hardship. Then we shift to the K-Corp laboratory in District 11 when she finds out the truth of how the singularity was made. She demanded that it be stopped this instant. It was greatly appalling to think that one must suffer endless sights of despair for the many. Then we shift to the pawn shop in District 10 when she attacks one of the syndicates there, seeing that the forces of evil must be uprooted quickly to raise the banner of justice high. Then we're at the gates of the drilling ship of the Botany Corporation, the branch facility on the Great Lake within District 21, where she saw negotiating with Ricardo, Big Brother of the Middle, as unthinkable. Then just before they headed towards the Ting Tang gang in the back streets of District 10, they travelled onwards. Back in reality, Hong Lu considered her powerful cries uplifting, making him feel as if they had the wind on them, at their backs. Heathcliff made it clear that while it usually took the wind out of him, he enjoyed a few of them as well. Ishmael saw that she messed up plenty of situations by charging on without looking both ways, such as twice in District 10 when she provoked a couple of syndicates, along with hitting the jackpots by using the wish power in the casino, along with District 11 at the checkpoint where she broke a taboo by breaking a wall separating one line from the other. At least she was consistent, and it's better than not sticking with stances. Ryushu liked her ACTS, or actions cutting through the which Sinclair agreed, not letting ambiguities, moral or otherwise, stop her. This time, shouldn't they be the ones to make sure that her adventures won't end there? Mersault asked, how? Roger asked if he was going to beat some sense back into her like she did to him at Call in District 11 outside of his burning home. He wasn't, as he doesn't want her to do that, and she doesn't want him to do that either, asking if they'll embrace her, knowing this. Dante would. They'll determine the time to bring her back to her senses. Urtis asked Father if that takes into account what lurks in the past of others. Even if they've killed tens of thousands of innocent people, would they still embrace them? Dante understood that this wasn't just about Sancho, it was about herself. Likely what she did in the Smoke War, the same war that Gregor fought in. Dante would. As long as they have the will to change, to move forward, they'll be there for them. Urtis will remember what they said that day. Then Sancho used the Sangre, or the blood, one of her own arts, which will inflict paralysis and be stronger clashing at the cost of Blood Feast, or 100 HP will be sacrificed if there's not enough of it, and she'll heal by the damage dealt. After that, she'll hold nothing back. Her attacks will either bind, paralyze, and or prioritize those with the most bleed. Sancho was badly injured, seeing the adventures ended, as did her dream. Sinclair told her that it wasn't over yet. They're major characters in her adventures too. They can't just end the story without asking its cast. She saw this as stupid. Dante saw that her words of denial had something new. Something that hadn't been heard since she became Sancho again. Anticipation. The door opened ajar. It was a narrow opening, wide enough for Sinclair and the others to get through to her. Dante reached out and seized this opportunity. just as they'd inverted time over and over again to not lose them. Stage. Narration. La Mancha Land, with its every move tied to its stage directions. They now knew what to do, what they must hitch themselves to. However, Dante said, Don Quixote, who despaired that this moment was to end her tale, still refused to give up. The theatrical backdrop appeared at that point. Faust refused to say anything about this. Sancho told them to stop it, not willing to entertain this, believing that she's come back to her senses, woken up from her delusions. They call her Don Quixote now, but she's Sancho. Sinclair understood what Dante had in mind and said that Don Quixote had never been on an adventure alone. How could she give up when she knows that they were all counting on her? Roger asked what she would think that she'd forget something so important. She had 12 companions on her journey. Then the backdrop had a hole knocked into it with casino chips pouring out of it. Gregor understood that not all fights ended with a triumphant victory, remembering what happened in District 4. Ishmael told her that every time they were teetering on the brink of defeat, she'd always shout, they shouldn't give up. Yi Sang told her that with every despair, with every moment of dejection from her fellows, the backdrop shifted back to the shepherd village. Yi Sang saw that the voice of despondency was made whole by Don Quixote's tales of wonder, so their sights wouldn't be led astray from their dreamward journeys. They were so extraordinarily ingenious and, well, so brilliant that it gave many the very resolve needed to rise to their feet during their darkest hours. Then a seagull pedaling a bicycle on a rope with a ball bouncing below it appeared. Heathcliff had to think about this. They beat the out of countless insane, or villains as she put it, fought the former G-Corp biomimetic troops, braved all kinds of monsters. Ishmael didn't want to say this, but they got swallowed by a giant whale. Ryushi said ART, or Adventures Rightly Told. Who disagreed? The adventures aboard the train would also make quite the tale. As the backdrop shifted to the forest, Honglu reminded her of bad, no-good people who were trying to take their treasures away from them as well, like the Encorb and Ahab. And also Nelly. He admitted that they had a lot of close calls. Mosalt saw no destination was free of risk. Roger saw that in the end they got their names positively plastered all over the newspaper. In District 20, they got their names out there like superstars. Then the squirrel that got fried by lightning outside of Wuthering Heights appeared, and got fried again. Faust saw that she might have, well, had more than 12 companions who cheered her on. Then in the abandoned lighthouse, before Virgilius found her, Sancho wrote to the most magnificent fixer of the sun. Their account was a tale most moving, a tale that could move mountains. She shall remember their tale between every breath of her existence. She aspired to be the righteous fixer of justice, just as they were. Sancho remembered this. She somehow always replied to her letters. She didn't even write any proper address on them. Then Sancho had a reply delivered. She read this, which noted that she dreamed of becoming a great fixer, telling her to persevere and enlighten herself until she understood her virtues. Then she'll become a fixer most brave. Never give up, for her dream shall be realized even in the waking world. Then she remembered herself as Don Quixote, asking, do they carry a dream? She does. Sancho realized that it was Bari who wrote those replies from those fixes. She also delivered all the books to her. Bari appeared to her. They promised to meet again once each of them was done on their ventures. Sancho added that they would tell one another all about them. Then we're reminded of Bari telling first Kindred Don Quixote to answer her duel, and she'll promise him upon her honour as a fixer that she'll grant him what he truly sought. She can give him a tomorrow. Don Quixote saw her speaking in riddles. Bari asked if that was a yes. He said, no, of course not. They fought each other. And he said that tomorrow is a promise that doesn't hinge on her blessing. Bari told him that it's not the tomorrow that she's talking about. It's the one that he seeks. He's been living out his days mired in meaningless, quietly wasting away, drinking human blood, compelled not by his own will, but by his sickness. In his countless years of existence, he's never had any reason to exist, but his illness, and this applies to his kind. They are all plagued by loneliness. It's the kind of suffering that can't be weathered through by huddling together with his family in the dark. So she offered him this, anticipation for what tomorrow holds, in other words, a dream. She can make him dream, telling him to shout his name out loud if he would accept her proposition. Give it their all. May the best warrior claim victory in that bout. He told her that his name was Don Quixote, and she told him that her name is Bari. They readied their preferred weapons, attacking each other. Of course, we know it ended in a draw. And when we get back to Virgilius telling Sancho to come with him, for that journey demanded her company. In return, the promised timepiece she once heard shall come to be by her side, even when she felt like giving up on herself. He promised her this. One day she'd return to the beginning of all things and tell them all about the adventures that she had. Then she remembered her brief awakening in Mephistopheles within the warp train. Sancho saw Dante, who called her Don Quixote, who was themselves in the memory, saying that she called them the promised timepiece. Sancho agreed that they were that. Dante was there to make good on that promise. That promise to continue their adventure. She asked, had the adventure ended? Dante said, no, they don't think it had ended. Sancho asked if that was true. The adventure goes on? Dante confirmed this. Even so, at this point, then Don Quixote asked Sancho, why does she return without slaying them? Sancho made it clear that she's not going to obey him. He saw her as always a rebellious child, unlike the others, even before she became his kindred. She never once begged for her life, even as life began to fade before her eyes, even after they embraced her as his child. She never once showed him that attachment to her life. Sancho told him that there was nothing to love in that life. He asked her to love that place. They've gone through hell and back, tried all manners of things to break these mad delusions to bring him home where he belonged. He suffered from his love, the stakes of his succor. The blood of humans was his glory. Sancho reasoned that the same madness had taken hold on her, if that was the case. Her ideas and beliefs, which was indistinguishable from utter insanity at first, slowly taking root in the barren, cracked earth that was her heart and began to grow. The times he spent, the nonsense he babbled at her as they adventured together only nurtured that hopeless garden. Don Quixote argued against that by saying that his dream was an abject failure. She must have seen it herself on that journey of hers. Was the world that she experienced out there, was it truly righteous as he always said? As they had dreamed together, was it as Bardi said? Were fixers honourable heroes and bastions of justice, willing to sacrifice their lives for the weak and the downtrodden? Was it true that good inevitably triumphs over evil? Sancho said no. It's why all those tales are fabrications. He fell off his steed. The shock roused him back into the waking world. He's too hurt, too broken to dream again. His dream had met its end. I don't think it was false, what Barney said, as it might have been true in the past, over 200 years ago. Time had clearly changed that over time, as in more recent times, fixers are typically self-serving, greedy who would lie, cheat and steal just to get the last batch of Parsium. Never mind the most monetary gains. Barley was clearly a woman from a different time. Then, Sancho received two Egeo gifts. A broken dream, which raises her to level 50, and everything she has is tier 4 for the remainder of the story dungeon, regardless of what it was at the time. And the dream begins anew, where it makes her final power increase by 2, and when an ally dies, the survivors heal by 15 SP and gain 1 attack power next turn, up to a maximum of 3. Only first Kindred Don Quixote remains to oppose them. Until next time. Hail the rabbit!